Seems like we're reliving 2008, right? All over again, doesn't it, folks? Silicon Valley Bank out of San Francisco, California, right? So what happened is that this bank was a bank that was heavily invested in the tech sector, right? So startups, venture capital, stuff like that, right? So they weren't really a normal sort of mom and pop bank where like normal people go to put their deposits and that kind of thing. They catered to startups, right? And the thing about startups is that apparently, they don't take a lot in loans, but would do a lot in deposits. So the bank had all this cash on hand. So a bank is supposed to take your deposits and loan them out to people, and then make money through the loans that are paid back to them, and that's how the bank makes money, right? And so they weren't getting a lot of money through loans, so they decided to go and invest in some government bonds, right? Which is not a bad idea. That's usually a safe thing. Government bonds are usually a very safe place to park your money, but they're mostly you get low returns on them, even when times are good. You don't really get, really huge returns on them, right? So they're fine when interest rates are low, but when interest rates go up, those bonds suddenly are not worth very much anymore, right? So what happened is that they had about 56% of their assets tied up in these government bonds and similar low yield securities, right? And these as interest rates went up, they lost value in these things, right? So companies started withdrawing more of their cash because interest rates were up, and they didn't have enough to cover it because the regulations that said that they had to have a certain percentage of cash on hand to cover their deposits were reversed during the Trump years, right? So after 2008, so what happened is that you had a law called God, what the hell was it? Uh, there was a law from the 1930s. I can't remember what it was called, but basically it was put in place after the stock market crash, right? And subsequent wave of bank failures. And it was put in place in order to stop that from happening again, right? And it was Glass-Steagall. That's what it was, right? Glass-Steagall, way back in the day, was put in place to keep banks from going belly up like they did during the Great Depression, right? Because what happened back then is that you had the 1920s, right, which was a very, you know, big sort of boom time, right? Which was actually the result of tax cuts, believe it or not, right? But yeah, the 1920s, the stock market like takes off, things like that. People are investing like crazy. And then you had the 1929 stock market crash because people overinvested and there wasn't enough regulations, right? And a lot of banks went belly up because of that stock market crash there. A lot of banks had too much money invested in the stock market and it all disappeared, right? So Glass-Steagall is put in place in order to stop that from happening. And it was fine. It worked like a charm for, you know, God, 60 years, right? Then in the late 1990s, Glass-Steagall gets repealed, right? Thanks to Bill Clinton and the Republican-led Congress, right? It was a Republican-led effort. Let's not forget that, right? But some corporate Democrats also signed on to it as well. So, and Bill Clinton actually signed the law to repeal Glass-Steagall, so it's not like Democrats are 100%, free from this, right? The corporate wing of the Democratic Party is just as much to blame for all of these financial collapses and stuff, right? As the Republicans are. So anyway, that leads to the crisis in 2008 with the housing markets, right? Because there wasn't enough regulations to say that banks had to keep enough money on hand to cover their deposits, So they just went hog wild with things like credit default swaps, and plus there was lots of corruption and that kind of thing. The S&P like giving banks a AAA rating when they didn't deserve it, stuff like that. Banks like God, what the fuck? Like selling financial products that they knew were not like viable, right? Goldman Sachs, for example, selling products to their customers that they knew were not viable, right? Stuff like that. So all kinds of ridiculous corruption, and that led to a giant collapse of the financial sector, which we had to spend trillions and trillions of dollars to bail out the banks, right? And the banks got away with it. That's the thing. These big, huge bailouts, they all got away with it. Scot-free. Nobody went to prison for this. Nothing, right? So, you know what we need to do? We need to put another layer, because we need to actually draw the happy face on his chest here, right? My little pissed off happy face has to be on his t-shirt. There we go. So anyway, completely 100% got away with it, and in the meantime, people's life savings and shit like that just went totally belly up. While the small people at the bottom lost everything, the rich people got away with all the money. Right? That's how they handled it last time, and that pissed a lot of people off. That led to the indirectly led to the Tea Party movement, right? Although the Tea Party movement was more about, a black man being president than it was for any sort of taxes or whatever. But indirectly led to that, right? It led to the Occupy Wall Street movement on the left, and there was actually some regulation that got passed, which was called Dodd-Frank, right? Dodd-Frank was sort of like Glass-Steagall, but way watered down, way less, but still said that, hey, a bank had to have a certain amount of its deposits covered, stuff like that, and it was designed to prevent the exact kinds of banking collapses that we're seeing happen right now. That just happened to these two banks, 2 in a row, right? And because it seemed to work fine all the way up until I think it was 2017, right? And then that's when Donald Trump got rid of, took the teeth out of Dodd-Frank, right? One of the things they reversed was what's considered a large bank, right? They said, I think it was something like any bank with more than $100 billion in assets is now considered a large bank. So the rules don't apply to banks that have less than $100 billion, shit like that, which is like $100 billion. You're considered a small bank with $100 billion. Are you fucking serious? So that kind of thing, right? And that is what led directly to these two banks going under. If we would have still had these regulations in place, then, it's highly likely that these banks would still be in business, and, shit wouldn't have collapsed, and we wouldn't be sort of like teetering on the edge of a financial collapse now, right? So, getting back to it, right? There was a run, because what happened, right, was basically a bank run on SVB, and then that's what caused them to go belly up, because they didn't have enough money to cover their cash, to cover their deposits, right? Because word got out that, hey, shit is unstable, and, all the customers, of course, when you think your bank is about to, like, disappear with your money, first thing they do is try to pull their money out, and then that causes a bank run, and that's what, if they don't have enough money to cover their shit, then they go bye-bye, right? And that's what happened to this other bank, Signature Bank in New York. Exact same thing. So something to keep in mind, Signature Bank apparently loaned to lots of like cryptocurrency organizations, right? Things like cryptocurrency exchanges and stuff, right? So they had a lot of their money tied up in that, and crypto hasn't been doing too well lately. Although since this shit collapsed, Bitcoin went way up. So if you guys have Bitcoin, I have a little bit of Bitcoin. I wish I would have bought more, but if you own Bitcoin, then you probably made out pretty well, right? Here's the other thing about this, right? The CEO of SVB apparently knew what was coming and sold off $3.6 million worth of stock, before the shit hit the fan. So it's like, okay, shit is going down, right? And his company's about to go out of business, and he knew what was happening, so he cashed out all of his money to try to get as much money as he can. So that, of course, is illegal, right? Let's undo that. Because this face is way too big. It needs to be smaller. It needs to be like that big. There we go. Right. That, of course, is insider trading. And if we lived in a normal, ordinary universe where the rule of law was, actually respected, then that guy should be going to prison for that. But is that actually going to happen? Is the CEO of SVB going to actually be held accountable for using his insider information to make a shitload of money at the same time while his bank fucking went belly up and screwed all of his customers? Nope. I can guarantee you right now, I give it a 70% chance that this guy is not held accountable for that at all in any way. 70% chance that we will not hear anything about the CEO of SVB going to jail or getting investigated or getting indicted or anything like that, right? At all. Apparently, they also gave bonuses to everybody as well before they went out of business, which is like, well, if you know that you're about to go out of fucking business, why are you giving bonuses to all your employees? That seems a little fucking fishy, right? Now, the good news for the customers of SVB and then this other bank, Signature Bank, is that the FDIC, the organization which insures your bank deposits up to $250,000, is going to pay them all of their money. So if you're a depositor in any of these two banks and you have millions of dollars in there, right, then you're getting your money back, which is, I think, a good thing, because the customers of these banks had nothing to do with this, right? They don't deserve to lose their money, the customers of these banks, right? They're just, they're people that thought that the bank that they were going to was trustworthy. We were doing business with them. They thought that, hey, a bank is a safe place to put my cash, right? And they don't deserve to get hung out to dry while the owners of the bank run away with all the money, right? They don't deserve that at all. So I'm very happy to see that, and which makes me think it's like, well, why does it only insure it up to $250,000 for everybody else? Just insure everybody's money. If you can pay for these people, right, then you can pay for everybody else. So it's kind of good to see that, Uncle Sam is actually taking the side of the little guy in this. And apparently the investors in these banks are not getting any, they're not getting their money back. So if you invested in the bank, right, then that's kind of how it should be, right? If you're an investor, then there's risk, and you take that risk on. That's part of what investing means, is, well, there's a chance you might lose your money. There's a chance that your investment might not pay off. And that's absolutely fine as far as I see. Good, fuck them. Right? They shouldn't have, been so damn risky. They should have diversified, right? And they should have kept more cash on hand instead of trying to, instead of getting greedy, right? And that's 100% like acceptable to me, right? We need to put it on his shirt up here too. So we need to create a new layer right here and draw the little happy face up here too, right? So that's some good news, right? Now, here's the thing that really got me about all this, right? Because apparently, they did that, right, in order to prevent, you know, people from freaking out. And because one thing you want to do when you have these types of collapses is you want to keep everybody calm, right? You don't want the general public to go nuts and think that their bank is going to collapse too and then cause a run on their bank as well. That's not what you want. And that's why they're covering everybody. And that's, I think, the right thing to do there, right? But here's the thing about this, right? So the reaction we're getting from the right wing here is they're trying to figure out how they can spin this in order to put the maximum amount of blame on Obama, or not on Biden. Excuse me, a little bit of a Freudian slip there. How they can put the maximum amount of blame on Biden, right? And subtract the maximum amount of attention away from the true cause of what happened, which is regulations were removed, regulations were taken away. Because, to the right wing, to the conservatives, to the Republicans, regulations are verboten. Regulations are bad. They should, you know what? Why don't we just make a circle instead of like doing this shit? Let's just make a circle here. Right. So they want to take, as much attention away from that as they can. Let's just stroke that. And that's leading to some very ridiculous and, oh, you know what we need to do? That's not right. We need to step backwards there. See, the circle, right, is, has to be at an angle, or else it's not going to look right. So, let's do it like this. That's the circle, right? Actually, no. I think that would look okay. Like that, right? Yeah. You can just stroke that. There we go. That looks alright. So we're getting lots of really ridiculous reactions, right? And one thing that I saw, which is really sort of really, really, really crazy, is this idea that they're blaming this bank collapse on wokeness, right? So before we get into this, I just need to make one little adjustment here. There we go. And let's just move that down just a little bit, like that, right? There. That looks better. Okay. So let's see here. We've seen from several different conservatives here. Ron DeSantis, Trump Jr., another guy named James Comer. They've all blamed this on wokeness, right? So here's a tweet here. Oh, okay. Well, fuck that. I don't care about... hang on, it's making me turn off my ad blocker, of course, because it's bullshit. Alright, conservative blah 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 blah. Load the damn page, please. Okay, so here's a tweet that I want to show you guys. Let's just put this over here. Let's stop that. Bring this over there. And let's turn on my window, laptop window. So this is a tweet of James Comer, who is from Kentucky, Republican from Kentucky. And let's see what he has to say about the SVB collapsing.
And then we see now coming out that they were one of the most woke banks in their quest for the ESG type policy, and investing. This could be a trend, and there are consequences for bad Democrat policy. And I think we need to keep an eye on all the banking sector right now.
Well,
and then we see now coming out that
they collapsed because it is a woke bank. The bank was woke. The bank apparently was investing in woke stuff. Like, I don't know, what the fuck is he even talking about? What are they investing in? What, Black Lives Matter? Right? Gender fucking neutral bathrooms or something like that? Like, like, how the fuck do you, like, be a woke bank? That doesn't make any fucking sense, right? That's fucking ridiculous. So yeah, that's fucking, what's his name, James Comer from Kentucky, giving a really ridiculous bullshit reason why this thing collapsed. Let's get rid of that fucking moron. Right. So what he was talking about, ESG, that's environmental social governance issues is what that is. Basically, it's things like, I got a little thing here. In business practices which follow those three tenets, So you say, for example, try to not pollute as a business, or you try to, you give your employees sort of like gender inclusivity training, or training on sexual harassment training or something like that, right? That kind of thing, right? Which is a thing that a lot of companies do, mainly for lawsuit reasons, Like, if you work for a corporation now out there, you most likely are getting things like, training to stop sexual harassment, training to stop, like, bigotry, that kind of thing, because the reason why you get this type of training is because the corporation you work for wants to be able to use that to prevent from being sued. So if somebody tries to sue them saying, hey, I didn't get promoted because I'm black, or because I'm gay, or because I'm trans, or because I'm a woman, they can turn around and say, well, hey, we make every employee we have take this gender sensitivity course, or this racial sensitivity course, or whatever, and this is our official corporate policy saying that you're not allowed to discriminate. When it comes to this kind of thing, you're not allowed to sexually harass people. You're not allowed to do this or that, and then that way they could just fire the employee that did it, or they can transfer the employee away, or they can settle out of court and not have to pay out a shitload of money, right? Pretty much every corporation you go to is going to do that, and unless you're like one of the executives in that company, or unless you're like the owner or some shit like that, if you break that policy, they'll fire you, essentially. Most places that I know of, every place I've worked at, I'm pretty sure that's sort of the industry standard. As long as you're not someone who's important and you don't obey those guidelines, then they will get rid of your ass, because it's cheaper for them to fire you and pay out whatever kind of severance package that they have to give you, rather than getting sued by somebody, right? And those types of suits are very hard to prove anyway. And especially if you're a contractor. If you're a contractor, you're gone. That's it. They'll fire you in a nanosecond for breaking any of these policies, right? So that's the first thing when it comes to social. And then, like, environmental part of ESG is like, they'll try to, some companies out there will try to do things in a way that doesn't pollute as much, or they'll try to do things like carbon offsets, or they'll invest, maybe if they're a company that, creates a product which pollutes a lot, like a car company, then they'll create they'll create an electric model, stuff like that, right? Now, the thing is, you would think this is the stuff that you would want corporations to do, so that's why conservatives are targeting this, because, you know, it's just another tool in the culture war that they have. It's like it's a way for them to find out, hey, here's how we can bully these corporations into doing what we want. For example, they're targeting, you're seeing a lot of conservative Republicans and politicians and stuff using this as a line of attack to attack social media companies like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, right? That kind of thing. You're seeing that this is a line of attack that they're using, trying to say that these companies are too woke and that's why they keep banning conservatives, when in real life it's because the people that get banned are breaking the terms of service. But they're trying to say, like, see, they're woke. These are companies that are too woke. They have the woke agenda, and you can tell by their ESG policies that they follow, and that's why they kicked Alex Jones off. And that's why they, like, kicked off Donald Trump off of Twitter and all this other shit. It's because it's really all a big conspiracy, because they're being controlled by, like, the Illuminati or some shit. It's complete fucking bullshit, folks, right? So that's kind of fucking ridiculous. Here's a tweet from Donald Trump Jr. Let's put this over here and open this guy up, right? Open up my main window. Donald Trump Jr. SVB is what happens when you push a leftist woke ideology and have that take precedence over common sense business practices. This won't be the last failure of this nature so long as people are rewarded for pushing this BS. Right? So, what is he posting here? Some ridiculous right-wing bullshit. Head of financial risk at SVB, Jay Espera, might have been busy with more important projects at the bank, such as LGBTQ issues, rather than assessing risk. So, since they don't want to focus on what really caused this collapse, that is, lack of sufficient regulation, they have to find some excuse. So what excuse did they find? This one person here was friendly towards LGBTQ issues, so obviously that must have caused the collapse. It's like complete, total fucking bullshit. Here's the thing, right? The bank didn't have to over leverage themselves like they did, right? They didn't have to, but they did anyway. Why did they over leverage themselves, right? Because you would say, yes, okay, in one sense, Don Jr. is correct here. The bank engaged in bad business practices, right? But it had nothing to do with gender issues. It had nothing to do with being woke. It had nothing to do, this idea that this woman was distracted somehow by her, LGBTQ activism, even if she even was, right? That's complete and total fucking bullshit. That has nothing to do with it at all. The bank, if they wanted to, could have kept more cash on hand. They could have diversified a little bit. They could have, made, not gotten greedy and bought a bunch of fucking, bought a bunch of securities and things which were so heavily dependent on the federal interest rate. They could have just, not over leveraged themselves and they'd still be in business, right? They didn't choose to do that because that's not what was making them money, right? What was making them money was to, do exactly what they did. And that's, here's the thing, right? They will, the corporations and banks and things, they only exist to make money. There's no other reason for them to exist, right? There's no other reason for them to be there at all. A corporation is not there to provide a service. A corporation is not there to give you anything. A train company that makes trains, Norfolk Southern, they're not there to create trains and shuttle freight back and forth. They're there to make money. Coca-Cola is not there to make soft drinks. They're there to make money. Right? Microsoft is not there to make computers or operating systems. They exist to make money. And if they could make money without doing those things, they would do that. If Coca-Cola could make money by not selling anything at all, right? By selling zero products, they would do that. If it was easier to make money by not selling anything, they would do that, right? If Norfolk Southern could make billions of dollars without running any trains at all, without hiring any people at all, without moving any freight anywhere in the entire country, that's what they would do, because that's the whole point of these organizations, is to maximize profits, right? And so they're going to do whatever it takes and whatever the law allows in order to maximize those profits. That's what they will do, right? So the only way you're going to stop them is to pass a law, is to regulate them. That is the only way that it will, that you can curb the behavior of these institutions, because they don't seem to be learning from past experience. I mean, how many like financial collapses and bank bailouts and shit have we had? 1929, then another one in 1989. You remember that? The fucking stock market crashing and the savings and loan industry fucking imploding in 1986. Remember that shit? Then again in 2008. And now another mini one right now. Hopefully this one doesn't get any bigger. It just seems to happen over and over and over and over again. You would think there would be somebody there that says, hey, this is what causes this shit. These are the business practices that cause it. We should not do these things. But they don't seem to be learning from experience, right? The attraction of, the profit motive, it's too great, right? The attraction of making a shitload of money while times are good is too big. Here's another reaction to this. Let's open this up. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh, wrong one. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene's fucking idiotic, brain-dead reaction to these bank collapses. The Fed is extending loans against high-quality assets to banks for nearly zero interest to prevent a run on the banks Monday, all because SVB didn't insure over 89% of their deposits and instead hedged on failing funds that offered sustainable finance and carbon-neutral operations to support a healthier planet. That's the first thing that's misleading there. Failing funds that offered sustainable finance and carbon-neutral blah, 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 blah. Got to throw that in there to, make it sound like that being green is not only unsustainable but also not profitable, which is not true, right? Green energy is one of the largest, fastest growing industries in the world right now, and if they actually had invested in green energy, they probably would have made way more money than they actually did, In other words, the fools running the bank were woke and almost became broke, but the Democrats and the Fed swooped in to make sure their woke donors at SVB didn't go under. That's not what happened at all either. First off, the Fed has only backed the depositors and not the investors. If you were an investor, you lost your money. Depositors kept their money, right? And that's the way it should be. I also like how she had to throw in the go woke, go broke thing, which is like, in real life, it's the exact opposite of that. They always, that's a favorite thing that all of these morons say. Go woke, go broke. Like, especially when it comes to things like green energy and shit like that. And it's like, and then in real life you find out, like, no, like solar is rapidly growing at an amazing pace. Electric cars are selling like crazy. You know what I mean? Like, and then when they talk about it when it comes to movies and stuff too. Like every time a woke movie comes out, it fails, and then the next Captain Marvel movie comes out and makes $1 billion fucking dollars, right? It's there's no truth to this line of attack at all. It's such fucking stupid bullshit. Anyway, reading some more. The serious threat here is that with full loans to banks on basically next to zero interest from the Fed will drive down the value of assets owed by banks that aren't in trouble, and that will cause them to be in trouble. They are manufacturing a banking crisis. This should not be happening. That's not true either. How how does that what let's reread what she just said here. Okay, let's reread that again. The serious threat here is that with full loans to banks on basically next to zero interest from the Fed will drive down the value of assets owned by banks that aren't in trouble. How does it do that? If, you know, if you give a loan to a bank at zero interest, which is what they've did for years, by the way, after 2008, it was called quantitative easing, right? They did that for years and years and years. They gave away trillions of dollars of quantitative easing, right? But if you do that, if you give $100 million to one bank, how does that make the $100 million in the other bank worth less? It doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't happen. See, when you talk about, like, increasing the money supply that causes inflation, that's not how it works. That's not what happens. Inflation goes up when normal ordinary people have money. That's why inflation went so fucking. That's part of the reason why inflation went so fucking crazy over the last year. Of course, we had things like supply chain issues, and we had pandemic related issues and shortages and shit like that. But part of the reason why inflation went so high is because everybody was getting jobs. That unemployment is super low now. It was below 4%, right? I think it's gone up a little bit. And that's part of the reason why they raised interest rates, because if you raise interest rates, it takes borrowing money becomes more expensive, so there's less job growth, and then people start losing their jobs. And that's one of the biggest fucking crimes that the Biden administration has engaged in. The Fed under Biden has raised interest rates like this on purpose in order to slow the economy down, with the idea that people will lose their jobs. And if he doesn't, if there's any reason that this guy will not get reelected, it's for this. It's for this incredibly ridiculous and idiotic fiscal policy. I can't fucking believe that he's actually trying and betting on people losing their fucking jobs. It's like, you fucking moron. Like, are you trying to lose the election? Right. So far, it seems to not be too bad. And if it stays the way it is now, I think everything will be okay, and he might get reelected. But I don't know. It might trigger a pretty big fucking recession, right? What'll that do? That will stop inflation. Why will it stop inflation? Because no one will have purchasing power anymore. Suddenly, everything becomes really cheap when nobody's got any money, right? It's only when but it's only when the people who actually buy stuff. It's only when the lower 99% have less money. That's when inflation stops. When they have more money, inflation increases. When you give money to the super rich people, inflation doesn't go up at all, right? It never does. Every time they do a giant tax cut, does inflation go up? Nope, right? Well, they just cut $2 trillion. Donald Trump's tax cut, for example. Did inflation go up after that? If he cut $2 trillion, $2 trillion went into the money supply. How come inflation didn't go up? Because it went to the rich people, because rich people don't spend money, right? Rich people don't spend money. They put it in the stock market. How come, after fucking a decade of quantitative easing, where they gave away somewhere between $7 to $14 trillion in quantitative easing. That's the thing, is that they don't really have a number on that. But it was a shitload of money. I've seen as low as 4 trillion. I've seen as high as 14 trillion. I'm guessing it's somewhere in between. It's probably around $7 trillion in quantitative easing, right? So what even was that? That was the Federal Reserve just giving money to banks. Just giving them money. Say, here, take this $100 billion. Take that. In order to shore them up after the fiasco that was the 2008 financial crash, right? There was something like fucking 8 rounds of that, right? And they just gave them money. So how come inflation didn't go fucking crazy after they gave away trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars like that? Because it went to the banks. It went to the rich people. It didn't filter down. It didn't trickle down to the poor people. And that's why inflation didn't go up. So no, she's completely wrong. doesn't have anything to do with that. If they were to go around and give normal, ordinary people, you know, tons and tons of money, inflation would go up, right? But if you just give it to the banks, no, it does not cause inflation. It won't cause, their assets to go down, right? And those banks won't get in trouble. And if they do get in trouble, they'll just get another bank. They'll just get another bailout. We've already shown in our country that we care more about financial institutions than we do about than we do about normal ordinary people. Here is a statement from Ron DeSantis, the 46th governor of Florida. Guess what he blames for these bank bailouts? Governor Ron DeSantis announces legislation to protect Floridians from the woke ESG financial scam. Today, Governor Ron DeSantis was joined by Senate President Kathleen Pasimoto. The fuck kind of Pasimoto? That sounds like a made-up name, doesn't it? And House Speaker Paul Renner to announce comprehensive legislation to protect Floridians from the woke environmental, social, corporate governance ESG movement that continues to proliferate through the financial sector. Okay, here's the quote from Ron DeSantis. Today's announcement builds on my commitment to protect consumers' investments and their ability to access financial services in the free state of Florida by applying arbitrary ESG financial metrics that serve no one except the companies that created them. Fucking ridiculous. Elites are circumventing the ballot box to implement radical ideological agenda. What the fuck is he talking about? Let's just read that again, okay? It does. It seems like here's the thing. Do you think anybody actually reads this shit? He's putting it out there. I think he knows no one's gonna fucking read it, but let's just read that line again. By applying arbitrary ESG financial metrics that serve no one except the companies that created them, elites are circumventing the ballot box to implement a radical ideological agenda. So, financial metrics that serve no one except the companies that created them. Right. Everything a company does serves no one except themselves. Right? Their interest is not in serving anybody else. See, that's the difference between a government and a corporation. And this is why whenever you hear conservatives saying that we should run the government like a business, it's like, no, you don't want to run the government like a business. See, the corporations are and businesses and companies and all of these things. Everything they do is self-serving. That's the entire point of having a corporation, is to make a shitload of money, right? And the way you do that is by serving yourself. You want to come out on top in every business deal, right? You don't want to come out on the bottom. You don't want to give stuff away for free if you're a corporation, right? A government, on the other hand, that is what a government does. A government is supposed to help people, right? A government is supposed to make laws and enforce them freely and equally, right? And also help people when they're in need, right? Give aid to people who are suffering, starving, who are in natural disasters, who are, going to end up homeless because of some ridiculous financial bullshit that happened, like this fucking bank collapse. That's what a government's supposed to do. Government is not supposed to make money. Those are the two major fucking differences. So when he says that, it's like, yes, of course they're fucking serving themselves, right? And the only reason why corporations do things like have, the woke agenda, right? But I can, this is a valid criticism though. Like the only reason why a company will do things like support Pride, right, or engage in an environmental effort or donate to environmental causes, stuff like that, is because it makes them look good, and it's all about PR. It's all about looking good so that people buy your product or your service. So in that sense, it's like, yeah, that's absolutely true. Of course they serve themselves. Who else are they going to fucking serve? Right? They're there to serve themselves. But this other thing where it says circumventing the ballot box and implement a radical ideological agenda, Like, first off, what radical ideological agenda are you talking about here? Like, what, people should be treated equally, right? How does a corporation force people to treat other people equally? It can't, right? Corporations don't create laws. There's no way for a corporation to force anybody to do anything. You know, if you work for one and you don't like it, and they want you to do something you don't want to do, you are free to leave. You can quit. It's like, okay, I work at this place. This place says no discrimination. I'm not allowed to fire people because they're the wrong skin color or they have the wrong dangly bits between their legs or whatever, right? You know, how is that a law? That just says, you can't fire this person. So it's policy. And if you don't like it, you can leave, right? That's the difference between policy and law. That's the difference between a corporation you know, and a government. A government actually can enforce a law like that. Segregation, for example. So no, it's like they bank on people not even reading this shit. Because when you read it, it doesn't make any fucking sense. It's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, that's Ron fucking DeSantis, like, cashing in on this shit here. Some things I wanted to show you from the more insane parts of the internet. Here's Paul Joseph Watson's take on this thing collapsing. Israeli banks transferred 1 billion out of SVB before collapse. Times of Israel report claims money was withdrawn before Fed seized Silicon Valley Bank. Right. Sounds pretty insidious, huh? We can close these other two things here. But let's read a little bit more of what Paul Joseph Watson has to say. So, those of you out there who don't know, he is a sometimes host of InfoWars. I think he still worked for InfoWars. And Paul Joseph Watson is a bona fide white supremacist. He's definitely a white supremacist. He's also very much an anti-Semite as well. I don't know if it's right to call him a full-blown Nazi though, but very much is a promoter of the whole Illuminati, Jewish overlords thing, and various other anti-Semitic, conspiracy theories such as that. According to a report by the Times of Israel, the country's two largest banks were able to transfer $1 billion out of Silicon Valley to accounts in Israel before it was seized by the Fed. So please keep in mind, I'm not supporting this. I'm just reading this for information purposes and telling you why it's wrong, because this guy is a piece of garbage. Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, the 16th largest bank in the country, collapsed after a run, blah, blah, blah. Right. While the collapse of SVB took many by surprise, financial authorities in Israel were apparently ahead of the curve. See, everything that Joe fucking Paul fucking Watson guy, Paul Joseph Watson, everything this guy says, it's he always has to throw in some slant that somehow the Jews were behind it. Right. Israel's two largest banks, Bank Leumi and Bank Halopim, set up a situation room that has been operating around the clock to help firms transfer their money from SVB before it was seized to accounts in Israel. Reports the Times of Israel. Over the past few days, teams at Lumitech, high-tech banking arm of Bank Leumi, have been able to help their Israeli clients transfer about $1 billion to Israel. The bank said, So why is he even posting this here? Because he's making it sound like it's something insidious. It's like, oh, well, this bank collapsed. How come the Israelis managed to get their money out and nobody else did? Right. But let's read a little more. While companies in the U.S. were not able to withdraw their funds before the bank's failure, Haaretz reports that a good many Israeli companies have been able to get their money out on time, but it was clearly not the case for everyone. And that companies whose deposits are now locked will seek to conceal this concern that any rumors might drive away customers, suppliers, and employees. So even this attempt, so this entire article is just here to Because they know that no one's going to actually read this, right? Because conspiracy theorists don't actually read anything. Conspiracy theorists are lazy as fuck and stupid as hell, and they do not read anything, right? All they know is that all they're going to read is this headline. So the headline just has to imply certain things. And of course, it's implying here that there was some kind of Jewish conspiracy to run away with all the cash before this bank collapsed. So the whole point of this thing and everything that Paul Joseph Watson ever puts out is to make people hate Jewish people. That's it. It's to get his followers and his readers and stuff pissed off so that they hate Jewish people. And so that's why the headline is misleading because if you actually go down and you read here, it says that, oh, this was clearly not the case for everyone. So what is it really saying? It's saying that these two banks, these two Israeli banks, which were putting, their money, right, as deposits in this other bank, did what anybody would do and try to get their money out, but they weren't able to get it all. But that was clear, a good many Israeli companies have been able to get their money out on time, but that was clearly not the case for everyone. I.e., many Israeli companies lost their money as well, right? So even the shit that he's posting here is like, it's like the exact opposite of what the fucking headline says, right? That's when you know what you're reading is propaganda put out by a fucking wannabe neo-Nazi incel fucking piece of shit like like Paul Joseph Watson, and not the fucking truth, right? But of course, the conspiracy board that I saw this on, they were all talking about how the evil Jews were stealing the cash, obviously. So apparently the propaganda works. One last thing that I wanted to show here, and then we'll end this. This is from Coronavirus News. What you are not being told. Right? Mandatory injections will be forced by cutting off CBDC central bank digital currency. Uh-huh. Okay. They want your kids. As the deliberately engineered financial crisis and inflation unfolds, calls from government and major media will become louder for the so-called solution, the abolition of all cash, and the implementation of a total financial control system run by central banks whose leadership is unelected and answers to the largest private member banks, which finally answer to the world's wealthiest families, the system known as central bank digital currency. Okay, moving down. Besides imposed starvation, other examples of control which could be exercised over individuals are allowing transactions to go through with only in a 5-mile radius of your home, restrictions on boarding public transportation, or denial of access to public spaces. The mRNA injections for COVID made by Pfizer and Moderna, commonly referred to as, quote, vaccines, are in fact entirely different, relatively untested technology that traditional dead virus vaccines. This is all anti-vax bullshit. Basically, long story short, that here's the relevant paragraph in this conspiracy theory. COVID was the start of a long-planned drive to central bank-run CBDC, central bank digital currencies, which will require every human who is not part of the billionaire elite to have an electronic digital ID in their person at all times eventually, and is already rolled out in Sweden, consisting of under-the-skin biochips, i.e. Now, this is why am I showing this to you guys, right? And this shit is a hoot. If you get a chance, there's a little more to read here, right? But why am I showing this to you? This obvious bullshit. It's because it's an example of how every time there's a major event in the news, it gets folded into the conspiracy theory, right? So this is a long existing conspiracy theory already. The idea that we're going to go to a cashless society and it's going to be, it's going to remove all the cash, and then that way they can just delete your money and all this other shit, which has actually mostly happened already. I mean, I don't know if you guys out there know, but money is just made out of thin air, right? That's in real life. It just is. They don't print it anymore. It's just the central bank just types some shit in a computer and money is created. But you'll notice how they linked it in with, they linked in the banks collapsing, these two banks collapsing in with anti-vax, like, vaccine denialism, COVID denialism, right? The Illuminati, and then also the mark of the beast. You see how all of those things were moved together here? We've got up here deliberately engineered financial crisis. That's the banks collapsing there, right? We've got the largest private member banks, which are which finally answer to the world's wealthiest families, i.e., the Illuminati, which is basically another way of saying Jewish cabal of Jewish overlords, right? You got those mixed together, right? You've got this idea that here's your vaccine denialism, COVID denialism. Throw that together, and then the long last thing here, electronic digital ID on their person at all times, consisting of under the skin biochips. That is the mark of the beast. Right? You see how they weave this shit together, and then every time something happens out there, every time there's a story of significance in the news, it just gets woven into the conspiracy, narrative, right? It's very skillful almost. You gotta I think, these guys, I think if they were to focus on writing screenplays and shit, they might actually have a career, right? It's very imaginative. It's also highly bullshit. So that's what the conservatives are saying out there now. That's their reaction to all this. They have to focus on everything except the answer to what's really, what could really stop the problem. That is, regulations, right? It's not because of regulations, obviously. It's because the banks are too woke. It's because they have diversity training, that they're trying to they do environmental stuff. That's obviously the reason. Except it's really a big, huge conspiracy theory because a cabal of Jewish overlords are trying to inject us with microchips through vaccines and shit, so that Satan, like Jesus can come back and kill Satan and I don't know, outlaw fucking critical race theory or some shit. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous, and you wonder why our country is so fucked up. And this is why. Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.